Good day all, welcome back to South Africa, and this is South African Prepper. The first Afrikaner refugees landed in America. After this video, I will attach for you the videos from America where they received these Afrikaners. Now, in the meantime, they've broadened the refugee status thing. It now includes most of the minority groups, so I would assume the colored people and Indian people as well. Um, so the last couple of days we went hunting, by the way. Put some pictures on now. But the last couple of days I've tried to find videos about why these people want to leave, the reasoning behind it, and obviously we all know the group, the Amerikaners, they've made quite a lot of videos about testimonials about how people live and the reason why they would like to go abroad. And the reason why I'm mentioning the hunting is I realized something during our hunt, that we live in a absolutely beautiful country. We live in a place where you are still relatively free, although there is a lot of discrimination and although crime in certain areas are out of control. Where we currently reside, we literally live in the middle of nowhere. Um, we've got a little satellite police station about 10 kilometers from where I am. And they basically work within office hours. They don't have night shifts because it's too small. And I realize that there are still places in South Africa that is relatively safe for the time being. Maybe this will change within the near future. We don't know. But I've been trying to understand how difficult it must be for these people to pack up and go. I watched an interview that Chris Wyatt did with a white lady from the Free State, and how she said she was attacked 4 times during the last 2 years, farm attacks. It sounded like nobody got really hurt, but anyway. So one can definitely understand why people want to pack up and go. And one of the things that she said is that she is extremely unsure about her future in another country, or in this case, America. And you could see when she spoke to Chris Wyatt that you could see that she's a bit stressed because she literally said she's putting her whole life and all of her faith and her future in the hands of the American government. So that's a tall order for them. I hope that they will actually look after these people. But this indeed is a historic moment for white South Africans again. And I think it's quite a sad historical moment because this specific lady referred to this being the Great Track 3.0, which is not really because going over to another country is not a track. You're basically fleeing from whatever is happening in South Africa. And this is not a video to judge these people. Uh, I do see some heavy backlash for South Africans staying, white South Africans that are going to stay here. I already see in the media, and I've read some articles about black people walking up to white people and telling them they need to leave. The one incident, a black person just walked up to somebody and said, you need to go. Why are you still here? Just take up the refugee status and leave South Africa. You are not a South African. And we've already heard from politicians' mouths as well that they just say, just go, just take. You've got the refugee status. So there's going to be a big backlash for people that are going to stay. Now, I don't think 100 or 200 or 500,000 white South Africans are just going to go. I doubt that strongly because you have got or actually 3 sections of let's call it classifications of white people. You've got the middle class and the middle upper class white community that lives in gated communities, that pay for private security, private schooling, private healthcare. So they are, to a degree, they are shielded from the realities of South Africa. And then you get the very poor white South Africans, the ones that live literally on the street, or then in very poor white communities or white squatter camps. And they like poor black South Africans do understand the realities of what's going on in South Africa, because they are faced with poverty and crime every single day of their lives. And then I would say the third category would be people living outside of the cities. People like us, farmers, that have to take care of themselves 100% of the time. So there's different perspectives and different realities for a lot of white people. It's not all the same. Your story is not my story, and my neighbor's story is not the same as mine. So everybody's got a different story. Everybody's got a different reason. But I do feel that we're going to see a big backlash against white people because of the first lot of refugees that are already over. I wish them the best. But I've said this before. I don't think the solution is for us to pack up and go. Again, when we hunted over the weekend, I had this really proud moment of just knowing that this beautiful place is where I grew up, and this beautiful place is my home, called South Africa. So just some thoughts. Next up, videos of them arriving in America. Leave your comments, leave your thoughts. This is just what I feel. This is just what I think. God bless.
Are also keeping a close eye on things in Washington, but stay with us because there's a lot more for us to discuss with our panel as well. But let's take you back live now to Washington, D.C., where those 49 South Africans are being welcomed.
The president made it clear that Afrikaners in South Africa who are the victims of unjust racial discrimination would be welcome to come to the United States, and he's now delivering on that promise. The Deputy Secretary and I just spoke to some of the folks who arrived on this flight, and they tell quite harrowing stories of the violence that they faced in South Africa that was not redressed by the authorities, by the unjust application of the law. The United States, as we were proud to say, stands for equal justice under law, and the fair and impartial application of the law. And again, this is a group that has not experienced that, and has, to the contrary, experienced violence and really fear for their lives in South Africa. They were really subject to very serious, egregious, and targeted threats. And we wish them well in their journey of the United States. We underscored for them that the American people are a welcoming and generous people, and we underscored the importance of assimilation into the United States, which is one of the very important factors that we look to in refugee admissions. And through this resettlement program for these folks who were vetted in South Africa, and we're sending a clear message that the United States really rejects the egregious persecution of people on the basis of race in South Africa, and we welcome these people to the United States and to a new future. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm Deputy Secretary Troy Edgar. First of all, I just want to thank President Trump, Secretary Nelm, for the opportunity to come down here and welcome these folks from South Africa. I also am very grateful for Deputy Secretary Landau. We do a lot of work together to try to further the objectives of the president, and this has been a very important day. It was great to greet these folks that came in, to hear their stories, to hear what they've been through. This is a real situation. These people have went through a lot of stuff, and we're just grateful to have them in the U.S. As many of us know, the United States has a long history of bringing people over. My wife was an Iranian, came over during the regime change in the 70s, and she's now here, speaks 5 languages, a school teacher. We think the American dream is possible for these South Africans. We're super excited for them, and Deputy Secretary and myself have given these people our personal information and said anything we could do to help them be successful. We just want to wish them the best. We thank you guys for coming down here and celebrating this with us. Thank you.
A couple questions. First, Breitbart.
Hi, thank you for your time. What are some examples of racial discrimination or attacks that initially caught the eye of the Trump administration, and is there a pathway to American citizenship for these refugees?
Sure. Well, thank you for that question. I think if you look at the executive order that the president issued back on February 7th of this year, it talks about the terrible expropriation act that was enacted last year in South Africa that allows for the expropriation without compensation of farmland. A fair number of these refugees were farmers who've farmed this particular land for generations and now face the threat not only of expropriation but also of direct violence. We had a chance to speak to them about many of these folks have experience with threatening invasions of their homes, their farms, and a real lack of interest or success of the government in doing anything about this situation, as well, obviously, as several very vociferous South African politicians repeating things like kill the Boer, kill the Afrikaner, and these people have been living under a shadow of violence and terror for some time now. Thank you.
And now BBC.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to know, there were many, from the BBC, there are many people who fit the criteria of seeking help, who are fleeing persecution. Afghans, for example, they live in a country run by the Taliban, but they're being denied refugee status. So I'm wondering, why has such an exception been made for the Afrikaans, especially when the South African government says they're not in danger? And are you going to open up the refugee settlement program for others?
Thank you for that question. I think you may recall that on the president's first day in office, on January 20th of this year, he issued an executive order that paused U.S. refugee programs that had been going at record levels under the prior administration and had brought in people that we were not sure had been carefully vetted for national security issues, and put a pause on the refugee admission program in general. That pause, of course, was subject from the very beginning to exceptions where it was determined that this would be in the interest of the United States. Some of the criteria are making sure that refugees did not pose any challenge to our national security and that they could be assimilated easily into our country. So the president on February 7th issued an executive order about the egregious conditions in South Africa, and all of these folks who have just come in today have been carefully vetted pursuant to our refugee standards, and whether or not the broader refugee programs for other people around the world will be lifted is still an ongoing consideration. But again, the president has recognized the dire situation of this particular group of people, and again, they went through the process. It is not surprising, unfortunately, that a country from which refugees come does not concede that they are refugees, and unfortunately, the South African government has not done what we feel is appropriate to guarantee the rights of these citizens to live in peace with their fellow South Africans, which is why under our domestic law, they were given refugee status. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Where the genocidal cycle really begins is dehumanization. We see that kind of dehumanization right here in South Africa right now, and it's in the very preamble to the beginning of the ANC's documents, in which it refers to all whites as, quote, settlers. Now, if you refer to everybody in a class as a settler, you're also saying this person doesn't belong here. You're saying it's the equivalent of what the Turks did to the Armenians. They said these people are really, not Turks, and therefore they don't belong in Anatolia. It's the same thing that the Germans did to the Jews, that the Jews were somehow interlopers in German society and should be eliminated. Whenever you have that kind of dehumanization, and of course we know that the Tutsis were treated in the same way in Rwanda, you have the beginning of that downward spiral into genocide. The fourth stage is where you actually have organization, in which the people who are going to carry out the killings or the expulsions and so forth are organized to do so, are trained to do so, and in which they're often armed, in which they're trained ideologically and so forth. You find there the Interahamwe in Rwanda or the SS in Germany and so forth. In this country, you have several groups who I believe are in that category. Under Julius Malema and the Youth League, I believe that you had a group that was organizing to carry out this very kind of, what can you say, forced displacement of the white population. And he was calling for it openly. And now we have the deputy president who is, about to be sued, in fact, by TAU, Ronald Lamola, who's calling for war. Now this is the kind of talk that, of course, it's not only pre-genocidal, but it's also, it comes before crimes against humanity. So what I've been seeing, not just among people who, of course, were strong defenders of apartheid, and of course I was here during apartheid, and so I saw apartheid in action. I was very involved, in fact, in the anti-apartheid movement, and so for me, this is really coming to grips with another reality that perhaps I didn't fully understand. We, I think, as human beings, need to first of all remember that we're all human, and that is the key fact about us. And so anytime you make these racial distinctions, you are dividing up the unity of the human race. Some people say that the big mistake people make about race is to think there's more than one. We are really all human first. And whenever I fill out forms, even in the United States, and we've still got these forms in the United States, where they ask you, what is your race? I just say, human. I remember that was also true here in South Africa, and of course they used to really laugh at me when I would cross the border from Swaziland into South Africa, because that's what I did then too. I would just say human. But it is my belief, I think that it is our ultimate characteristic in the sight of God. And I believe that is really what we need to remember always. The next stage is polarization, in which you try to portray the people who are not with you as somehow being against you, as being your enemies, in which you portray the moderates, for example, the Democratic Alliance or other people like that, as somehow being also the enemies. That is where we have classified South Africa right now as a polarized society, one that is still racially polarized. Yesterday I was really struck that at a conference of the F.W. de Klerk Foundation, in which the F.W. de Klerk Foundation had invited representatives of the ANC to attend, not one person from the ANC attended. And that is amazing. To have a Nobel Peace Prize winner invite and then have no one attend, it's just astonishing to me. And I saw the polarization, in other words, here in very real terms. What worries me the most is the next stage, because the next stage is the planning, it's the preparation. It's the preparation for how to carry out killings. It's the preparation for how to carry out forced displacement, for how to drive out the people that you don't want in your country. And that is what we are worried is happening now. We are worried that there are organized groups that are in fact doing that planning. We raised South Africa from stage 5 to stage 6 when Julius Malema began to go around singing the Shoot the Boer song again. It became clear to us that the Youth League was in fact this kind of an organization. It was planning this kind of genocidal massacre and also forced displacement of whites from South Africa. And so we raised it to 6. When Julius Malema was then, thanks to the TAU and others, tried for hate speech and was convicted and was in fact enjoined by the judge from ever singing that song again, we said, oh, you know, there was a great sense of relief from some of us that maybe South Africa was pulling back. But then the president himself started singing this song. Well, this really worries us now. And one thing that I have learned on this trip is just how strong the Communist Party still is in the African National Congress, COSATU, the Youth League, and other parts of this system. The farm murders, we have become convinced, are not accidental. We don't know exactly who is